When life gives you lemons, well, make a career change out of it. My guest today is Katie Mantwa George, who's an empathy guide and a certified meditation teacher. She trained in the Vedic tradition with the renowned Deepak Chopra and then the Dalai Lama. However, her life wasn't always about ease, flow, and listening within. Having worked for 15 years in corporate leadership roles and recruitment, she always knew there was more to her desire to support others. Today, as the founder of Being Human Well, she blends in her African heritage, Eastern spirituality, and her passion for sound healing to help her clients embrace empathy and self-compassion. The goal? A complete transformation in the workplace and in the personal life of her clients. So tune in to find out how she does her magic.
It was the kick that I needed. And it was funny because once I got that kick, something just kind of clicked in me that this is such a strange thing that has happened to me. There must be a reason why this has happened. This is not what I was planning, but somehow I felt this huge sense of relief. I could almost feel like my body physically relaxing in a way that I hadn't felt before. And so I thought, I have to listen to this.
Well, hello, Katie. Good afternoon. Really pleased to have you on the show today. You can barely hide your giggle and your smile, which is fantastic. It's a good way to start the podcast.
I know. It's so funny. My husband always says to me, actually, that when I smile, I start laughing. So if I start smiling, I won't be able to stop. And then it turns into a laugh. So there'll be plenty of laughing/smiling throughout this, I'm sure.
Yes, we love a good laugh during the conversation. But I always like to start with a bit of a take me back to where it all started for you. And what our listeners may not know is that London is a small place and we almost overlapped and met almost 10, 15 years ago when you were starting your career and I was starting mine because you did something very different at the time.
I did. It's so great to be here talking to you. So yeah, I used to live a very different life to the life I live now, that's for sure. I studied psychology at university, went on to do a master's in occupational psychology. So I've always been really interested in people and their behavior. And then straight after that, went into the corporate world at Barclays Capital, Barclays Wealth, and then moved through a number of other investment banks and had a 15-year career in recruiting. Spent most of those 15 years leading graduate and intern recruitment teams across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I had a really interesting time learning about how to hire excellent people and how to look after them and train them, and a very rewarding experience, I would say.
Yeah, and I always like to joke if I could have had an alternative career, it probably would have been something with psychology or recruitment or both. And that's why I always wonder, there must have been some kind of common thread, or, I know that you focus now on empathy coaching, but surely when you go into recruitment, there's a lot of these same themes and commonalities that come up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, it's really about understanding people. I find that clearly when you're trying to find the right person for a role or even the right person for the company, it's important that there's a match there between what the candidate wants and what the company wants and needs as well. And I think a lot of people see it as the candidate kind of begging for a job from the company and the company has the upper hand, but actually you won't believe what goes on behind the scenes in terms of hiring managers and recruiters all looking for the same people or worried that that person they really want might take an offer elsewhere. So companies and recruiters selling to the candidate just as much as the candidate is trying to sell to the company. But it was always, the candidate is the number one customer and they're the person that we need to look after and make sure that they're okay. And that doesn't always feel like that in some recruitment processes, but I was always the leader who wanted to make sure that the candidate had the best experience possible.
Yeah, and I actually went through one of those programs. I actually started my career in that same institution that you just mentioned, and I was in the grad scheme, and somebody came to the university. I went to university in Edinburgh, and they did one of those milk rounds, and I think I would, who knows where I would have ended up, or whether I would have even ended up in this industry. I have to thank graduate recruiters for making me feel like it was actually possible. I think there's definitely an element of, when I look back at it, some of these kind of Women's Day that they were organizing, diversity aimed, and that experience made me feel like, oh, I can actually be one of them, and I really want to do that. So I definitely think that graduate recruitment plays a big role.
So a big part of that was actually just us going out to universities and running events to say, you are able to apply for this. You're capable of doing this job. Don't opt out just because you think you're not going to get it. And really supporting students in particular, but also veterans or returners who've been out of the workplace for a long time, who may have lost some confidence, to actually build that confidence and actually make the application in the first place, and to really believe that they have a chance of getting it, because they do. So it's more than just recruiting, really. It depends on, how you see the job, but I certainly saw it as an opportunity to open the eyes of any person out there. And you know what, sometimes even to have a very honest conversation with someone and say, I don't actually think this is the right thing for you, or you believe you should be going into this company or this industry or this role, but maybe you're best suited for something else.
You want to make sure that it works out for both sides, and ultimately, if you can help someone in the process, because you can see that they're just wasting their time pushing in one direction. And let's be honest, all of us have done that at one point or another. And the reason why we're on the show today is because we talk about changing careers and doing it with, with a piece of mindfulness. I suppose that's really, really important. And you did combine both of those things, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think obviously you started with graduate recruitment, then you had various other roles in the corporate world, which was some very valuable experience. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think your last role before you changed your lifestyle and career was not necessarily with graduate recruitment. It was much broader than that.
Yeah, no, it was. And it really was the pinnacle of my career, in terms of that's the kind of role I wanted to be in at some point on this journey. And really what it was about, I suppose, being more at the strategic level of recruiting and what it means for an organization and what it means to lead an effective recruitment team, right? So it was a very much, especially in the first 12 months or so, a trust building exercise of me going out to the different countries. So we were recruiting into about 21 different cities at the time. I'm sure it's a lot more now, and hiring nearly 1,000 individuals per year. So that was a very different role, and really was exactly where I was hoping to be as part of my career journey. So I had so much learning, and actually very grateful that I had the opportunity to do that, because it's quite rare.
Yeah. But I think throughout all these roles, there's always that common theme, which was all about humans and people and helping people and understand themselves better, find the right role for them, find the right company, help internally. You always had that focus from the outset. So what made you realize that it was time to move on?
Yeah, do you know, if I were to be completely honest with you, it took me a long time to realize it was time to move on. I was really holding on to so much. The role I was in was for a really huge company that had an incredible brand. So you do become quite attached to that label of, oh, look at me. I'm, the Europe, Middle East and Africa head of this big recruiting function for this huge organization. So I would say that actually there was not very much that was giving me the signals that I should leave the organization or even leave the industry. But when I look back on it now, it was very obvious. It seems now very obvious and clear that I could have easily left, 3-4 years before I did, because I just wasn't really fully aligned in the work I was doing. And I'm very good at enjoying whatever I'm doing and doing really well, whatever I put my mind to. So it's very easy. A lot of people do this as well. If you're doing well in it and you're mostly enjoying it, why not just continue?
Obvious, I suppose I always call them red flags or things that really put you off, a terrible toxic culture. None of that, people just tend to stay.
Yeah,
Don't
people just
question
tend
it.
to stay. Yeah. And until you have some kind of, for me, actually, there's kind of like a physical reaction at times that started saying to me, oh, okay, you're not feeling great, or you're clearly very stressed. There were some signals like that I should have been more aware of at the time, but maybe wasn't. But actually, in the end, I took a sabbatical because I realized I needed a break. And in fact, actually, I was going through some difficult personal challenges at the time. So in my mind, I was thinking, oh, that must be why I need the sabbatical. Let me ask for the sabbatical because I'm going through these personal challenges. And had a coach at the time who was coaching me to kind of build that strength to go back into the workplace and even double down even more on what I was doing. And I remember her kind of saying to me, oh, maybe you need to open up your mind a bit to what other possibilities there might be. And I thought, well, no, I don't think so. And then, keeping quite a long story short, I ended up leaving the organization because I ended up being made redundant after returning to the company.
So the universe gave you the answer that you were
Yes.
toying with yourself.
I know. And everyone always says to me, oh, gosh, you were so brave to leave such a great brand and, it was such a great job and all of this. And I was like, you know what? I have to be honest with you. I wasn't actually that brave. It wasn't necessarily 100% my
That was the
choice.
well, we call it the kick in the butt that you needed, I suppose.
It was the kick that I needed. And it was funny because once I got that kick, something just kind of clicked in me that this is such a strange thing that has happened to me. There must be a reason why this has happened. This is not what I was planning, but somehow I felt this huge sense of relief. I could almost feel like my body physically relaxing in a way that I hadn't felt before. And so I thought, I have to listen to this. And so I said to myself, well, I can either, go and get another amazing job in another industry or another company. That would be the natural thing to do. But I just had this visceral negative reaction towards going near any similar job. So I thought, what's happened to me?
But it's so interesting. Yeah, I love how you say and describe it so vividly because it's literally your body is telling you something, and so many of us, so often we just forget to listen to those signs. And I hear from friends, I'm tired or this and that. Well, maybe focus. Give yourself, as you said, you needed that break to refocus your thinking and to actually listen to what your body was probably telling you for years, but you just weren't prepared to hear it at the time.
That's right. That's right. You don't hear what your body's telling you when you're super busy. And it's in that sometimes you might feel it, when you eventually have a 1 or 2 week holiday when you're working and then you feel maybe something shifting within you, but having a longer period of time where you are just there confronting yourself and being with yourself and, doing a bit of work to unravel what it is that attaches you to a certain job or a certain thing or a person or anything. You start to realize that, gosh, actually, the reasons that I think I enjoy this thing don't actually align with my values or who I am. So what are my values and who am I?
But
You have to kind of free fall to be able to really understand what that is. You have to be brave and just say, I'm not touching anything. So I just said, I'm not touching any job. I'm going to just free fall for a while and let's see what happens. That's the brave thing. The brave
that
thing wasn't
is.
leaving. The brave thing was free falling.
Yeah, it is because it's very rare, and I think there's always the financial element involved in not having certain thing, and also I suppose the psychological of we most of us as humans we love certainty, and when you do something like that, you don't have the certainty. So being actually comfortable in that, not knowing where the road's going to take you, it is definitely requires an element of bravery, and I always ponder on bravery, and it's not the act of doing something; it's the act of still being afraid, but still going ahead with it. It's not, I'm sure you had doubts and it wasn't like you weren't afraid, but you did it despite the fears that I'm sure were popping up at some point or other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is always a healthy level of fear. I mean, even now, there is definitely that level of fear and it kind of keeps you motivated and keeps you going. But I think that's sometimes when you're feeling that fear and when things are feeling a little bit scary is really when you know that you're pushing yourself, right? And that you're growing and expanding, because sometimes when you're comfortable and some people actually, when they're in their roles as well, they start to feel super comfortable and everything's very smooth. You typically are not learning and growing or expanding. But when you feel that sense of fear, it's because you're doing something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, something that's a bit new and unique. And obviously, when you're running a business, almost every day is new and unique, and you're learning new things and you're going to meetings that you're not quite sure if you're going to be able to answer the questions, or maybe you're presenting on something that you haven't quite done yet. You're hoping a client might experiment with you. So I think living in that little healthy level of fear, which also for me is kind of a bit exciting. The unknown to me is quite exciting.
Yeah, not having the same thing on repeat every day and finding it dull and monotonous. But I think for me, I just really wanted to say this because you were laughing about being made redundant, and it's obviously a difficult time for many, especially when they don't expect that to come. But I still often come across, and this is probably one of the first questions that I ask people when they're debating: would you be happy if you were made redundant? How would that make you feel? And if the answer is probably yes, then that gives you quite a strong indication. And yeah, I think there's definitely an element of being honest with yourself. But I've heard many other stories where people were made redundant, some of my friends, and they had to pretend how disappointed they were and actually went on celebrating. And of course, that's not the case for everyone. But, often when you're already on the journey of wanting some kind of a different lifestyle and you feel that, as you said, it's not aligning with your values, that's not an uncommon reaction. But how I want to go back to the actual process. So here you are, free falling as you described it. And how do you move from the free falling to actually finding your new spot?
Do you know what? It was such a funny thing. Once, because it was a shock to me to get made redundant. Actually, that was a lot of work I had to do to heal myself after that, actually, because it was only in hindsight that I realized it was actually a good thing. It probably took about 6 months for me to think, that's great. But that's a journey. To find yourself in that position. But you know what? Obviously having a coach really helped me. I started doing a lot of well-being practices. I picked up doing a lot of yoga. I was living in South Africa at the time, and there's such a very easy connection to nature, to the ocean, the mountains, just to being outdoors, which I found the more I spent time outdoors, the more I just felt this sense of ease that just kind of was slowly seeping into me, and also a sense of clarity and ability to actually see myself for who I am more effectively. And quite a few of my previous colleagues and people I'd worked with before started saying, well, what are you going to do? And I thought, well, I'm not really sure. But they said, you were actually a really good leader. And we all really miss you as a leader. And the style of my leadership style was not always, but was, I suppose, a little bit unique at times. I didn't naturally really fit into the typical leader you would find in finance or insurance or in tech. So I was always doing my own thing and kind of trying to stay true to myself within those environments. So there was that element of a lot of people asking me, how do you actually remain as your true self within those environments without shifting and changing who you are? And I seem to have been able to do that relatively well. But also, how do you lead teams in a way that brings them on board? Funnily enough, the time that I ended up launching my business was about the right time that organizations and people were ready to hear about empathy. Whereas even just a few years before that, people wouldn't have been as interested in what they felt were very soft, fluffy skills. So it was really actually feedback from previous colleagues that opened my eyes to the fact that that was my superpower. So we talk a lot about superpowers in the previous company I worked in, and focusing on those superpowers. And I thought, well, then that was my superpower. So why don't I go back in and support the companies I worked in to understand the type of leadership I was doing? And it's much easier to do that from outside than it is to do it when you're in the moment and in the company. So that was really how it started. And so I just started by running a couple of sessions and realized that I loved it and realized that people were enjoying it. And I thought, like, okay, this is a business. I think I actually registered the business probably about 8 months after I'd already started running sessions, because I still didn't quite believe that I could make a living out of doing this, and realizing that people actually found it important.
Yeah, but I love that because I think there's so many things that, as you were speaking, I often come across when I speak to other women who are looking to launch their own business or practice, whatever it may be. And we always say it's not just about launching new business. Sometimes you find ways to integrate something that you like alongside your current job. But often when I find that when we connect with a more feminine approach, and I was literally talking to a common friend this morning about this, there's always the way of, I come up with a product and I start pushing it to people and hustling and knocking on doors and trying to literally push it down their throats. Or it could be what you did, which is you listen to what people were coming to you, what they were telling you, not just feedback, but actually they were, I think you're really good at this. Can you do this for me? Can you deliver this? Can I learn from you? So in a way, you let people define and come to you and build the product rather than you trying to push something and then find that it wasn't working. And then also the idea that you gave it freedom to be what it is, because I often hear that these things evolve so many times, and I'm sure that business continued to evolve from those very first 8 months to what it is today.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another thing actually that's worth I suppose talking about just for a moment is to not be set in what your business is. I'd probably say that I've had to update my offerings and my website probably every month in terms of not straying away from the core values and the core purpose, But actually, every time you run a session, every time you speak to somebody who's in the industry, you learn something new and you adapt based on that feedback. So it's really important not to stay stuck to your ideas that, that might not actually be working for everyone. So I even remember when I launched my business, I said, I'm not going to do anything around diversity or inclusion. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to talk about only empathy. And then as time went on, I started seeing the very obvious and clear connection between inclusion and empathy. And what I see is the evolution of DE&I, and then moving towards empathy, compassion, or intersectionality kind of in the mix there as well. So yes, it's important to not stay stagnant. And so I'm a meditation teacher as well. So I'm a certified meditation teacher. And that is one of the most effective ways to cultivate an empathetic mindset. But sometimes saying that to corporates doesn't really resonate, because it's almost like you're trying to combine something that is sometimes seen as a little bit spiritual and woohoo with something that is, proven and a business skill to be empathetic. And don't be put off by that. So I'll still, regardless of what people will say to me, I'll say, I really believe that if we do even a 5-minute meditation practice before this session, everybody's going to absorb the information more effectively. Everybody's going to be more present in the room. Everybody's going to ask more meaningful questions. Let's just try it, and not listen to the voices that might say, no, don't do it.
Sure, it must not have been easy sitting in that boardroom, because I know, and I often hear from many people who are otherwise well-meaning, I can't do this, I can't stop the thoughts, I've tried a few times, it's not for me, especially when they're at the later stages in their life, when they think they know it all and they've seen it all and they know who they are. I mean, that can be easy, but on the other hand, I think that that's probably exactly what made your business unique, because there's many businesses out there that do one or the other, but you found a good way to combine your interest into one. I always call this that sound of breaking glass moment, when you realize that that's actually what makes your business so valuable.
It's true. And it's also part of, if I'm going to go and talk to people about being their true selves and understanding who they are, but if I'm running a business that doesn't reflect my true self, then I'm not living what I'm teaching. So if I'm going to only bring certain elements of myself to how I work with individuals or with workplaces, then it seems hypocritical to to actually take out a huge portion of my life. The meditation is a huge portion of my life. It was something I used as a way of looking after my well-being when I was working in the corporate space. Was something that I went into in a huge amount of detail during my redundancy, was something that actually supported me to stay strong throughout that process. So for me to omit that from what I actually use to support myself, to then not share that with everybody else, would be absolutely crazy. And it's something that I've tried and tested. So it just feels so right for me. And sometimes it's those things that are a little bit different and a bit unique that people haven't quite seen yet. I hope that in fact, it's already happening now, but, maybe in 5-10 years time, everybody will be doing a little bit of meditation before a conference or a meeting or anything else. And they'll say, oh yeah, I do remember Katie saying that this could work.
I've started journaling recently at the start of my day, even in the office sometimes when I get in the morning. Or it's not always meditation. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. In the beginning, I was thinking, oh, what are people gonna think? And I said, well, look, everyone's got their own ways. This is what helps me. Other people like to be sitting by the water cooler or spend 15 minutes talking, making tea, and discussing their weekend. My way is to just get in my zone and focus, and that's what brings me joy. Other people get it in other ways. So I agree, there's not one way or one size that fits all, but certainly it's something that if it's appealing to you, then you should probably explore.
Yes, definitely. And meditation is not for everybody. I've certainly had people who have done meditation and said, oh, it's actually not for me. And that's totally fine. But for me, it was the thing that helped me to find clarity and focus, for me to actually see things for what they are versus my conditioning and the stories I've been told, or the life that I've lived and the experiences that I've had. So it's very easy to project that onto other people, and especially in the workplace or even with your friends and family, to come to conclusions or to perceive things based on your own experience, which is a challenge for all of us, right? And that is what empathy is all about, stepping into somebody else's world to be able to understand what they need in that moment versus what you think they would need because of how you would like things to be. So I noticed when I started meditating more and more that I was able to see people more clearly for who they are. And that was a beautiful thing. And I thought this can only be a good thing for me and for them as well.
And that's element of self-awareness. And we had in one of the earliest episodes, Jan Rees, who is a communications coach, and she helps people exactly with that. She uses psychology, archetypes, but yes, it's all about understanding where the other people might be coming from and knowing that it's okay if it's not the same place as you might be coming from. But I think maybe there might be some listeners out there that perhaps could be thinking about wanting to start meditation. Some probably already do it, which is great. And others are not necessarily in the camp of, oh, that's not for me, but thinking, I'd quite like to try it, but it feels hard, it feels daunting. So are there any tips that you can give them if they want to go on this journey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that, first of all, I think a lot of people, when they do, start to try and meditate, that they don't always have a joyful experience or a peaceful experience with it.
That was me.
To be honest, that was me too.
Very restless. I don't understand why I have to sit and not move for 10 minutes. That's awful. I couldn't think of anything worse.
Exactly, like nothing's happening. Why am I, you always
My
want to
legs start to
people.
hurt and my back hurts and I'm just going to stop. Yeah, it was terrible.
Exactly. And you know what? That actually reminds me of one of the key things that I say to people in any of my sessions is that there is no particular way that you're supposed to sit, actually. So we're often told that we need to sit with our legs crossed on the floor, and we see so many visuals and pictures of individuals doing that. If that's comfortable for you, then that's great. But the idea is that you're comfortable when you meditate, right? So you can sit in a chair or sit on the sofa or lie down on your bed. It depends on, I do go into detail about the types of practices, and some of them are better not to be lying down because you don't want to fall asleep. But in general, you're just supposed to be comfortable. And when you're comfortable, you're more able to focus your energy, and your body's more able to actually focus on clearing your mind, or at least cleaning your mind, versus how do I stop the pain in my back?
But it's so intuitive, isn't it? It's anything else that we do, including in your role, day-to-day role, is if you're not comfortable with what you're doing, how are you going to do your job? I mean, it's the same thing. If you're not comfortable in meditation, how are you going to get any benefit out of it?
Exactly. So that's a huge one. And if somebody is, thinking about where do they start, I started on the apps. There's lots of different apps out there. And, now actually I very rarely use an app because I have my own individual practices. But the apps are a great place to start, mainly because you can pick, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You can slowly build up. But also it's quite handy to have something that's a bit of a journey. So, a 5-day, 7-day, 21-day journey that you can go on. And the apps are quite good for that. I actually have a 21-day journey you can do on Fern Cotton's Happy Place app. And that really is to support you to check in, to have a reason to check in every day and test out your meditation practice. And 21 days is a great length of time for you to experience different things and to
Build a new
understand.
habit as well, just making space for that in your day.
Exactly. So I was really using apps for probably about 6 years before started to actually want to understand the roots of meditation and to understand the science behind it, which is why I ended up going on doing the Deepak Chopra program, which you can actually do just as a student. You don't have to do the full program that gives you the certificate to be a teacher. So I would say, yeah, just start very small and don't be hard on yourself and sit comfortably.
Very important tip. Yeah, and I admit I'm one of those people that are known to fall asleep if they lie down. So I agree. I would fully wholeheartedly recommend starting small. And it's the same with anything else. It's always start small. Don't be overly ambitious. Don't say, oh, I'm going to do half an hour on my day one. It's probably not going to work that way. And remember any other time when you were picking up a new skill, how that went, and that's a good place to start. The one question I wanted to ask you is also, you are the owner of a small business and you built that from scratch. Again, as you said, there were many iterations, and I'm sure you've had other attempts and other things, ideas that you've started, some that work better than others. What is really the one thing that keeps you motivated and keeps you going and makes you feel like that's your calling and you're never looking back to what your life was before you had that business?
Yeah, do you know what? For me, it's the feedback I get. It's when you're running your own business, and especially when you're by yourself, you don't have much opportunity to bounce ideas off colleagues or anything like that. Sometimes you're not quite sure what's going on, or if anybody's actually enjoying it, or if you're on the right path. Um, so I just feel such a huge, immense sense of joy after I've meditated with somebody, after I've delivered a workplace session. I feel like I've done something good for the world. It sounds really dramatic. It's not like I'm, running a country or like managing a charity or something, but I feel like I can feel and see the shift in people around me. And even just after a few minutes with our eyes closed, just opening our eyes together as a collective and feeling the shift in the energy of the room is very noticeable. So I feel like the results and the feedback come very quickly from what I do. Even just delivering an empathy session, everybody feels this desire for more empathy within their working environment. Everybody really wants to be seen as a human being in the workplace. Everybody wants to be themselves in the workplace. So yeah, I think number one is definitely just how I feel afterwards. I just know that I enjoyed it. And that was not always the case in everything I've done before.
Yeah, that's always the thing that I think resonates the most with me, and that's how I feel after recording an interview here or doing any of these episodes. It means something to me, and I think that's why it's just probably the best test that you can ever do about whether something is the right vocation for you or not is how does it leave you feel? And yes, of course, there will be days, some days will be harder than others. And we're not saying here pretending that every day is perfect. And I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I've personally learned from meditating is just to accept things as they are and also to accept that thoughts will come up in your head. And the less you fight some of those things, the better and the easier it actually comes. And re- this realization that it's not something to be fighting against and that every day is different and not to, I suppose, be too harsh on yourself when you fail on doing your 10 minutes of meditation every day. Well, one day's not going to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. I love that you actually mentioned this element of acceptance as well, because it's such a huge part of the stress that we feel in our lives in general is this inability to accept things for as they are or to accept people as they are, right? And this constant kind of pull and tug against what you hope for and what actually is. And that can be a real challenge and brings a lot of anxiety to a lot of us. And I think that that's a journey that you go on. And, depending on whatever your mode is, whether it's exercise or meditation or reading or whatever it might be, so much of that is about helping you to accept your life and your experiences and to understand what you've learned from everything that you've been through and how you can then use that to be able to support other people as well or to understand other people. What is something I can accept is happening, but I don't want to be part of and therefore need to move away from, but not try and change it necessarily? And what is actually there that I can work on, within the business or within yourself to accept, some of the maybe darker sides of ourselves. So I love that. I love that you brought up acceptance. It's a huge one.
Well, it was probably one of my biggest lessons over the last year, I think. And it certainly once you go in that journey, as we call it, it certainly changes everything around you. But because we've talked about this journey, there's one question that I always like to ask at the end. Where do you hope this takes you? And where do you see business, the role that you have now in the near future?
I really want to do more longer term journeys and experiences with people and with workplaces. I find that quite often you might meet someone once and then maybe do a 1 to 3 hour session and you feel that positive impact and that, the feedback is wonderful. But what I really would love to see more people on longer journeys. I've worked with, a couple of clients for between 12 and 18 months and you start to see some change and you start to be able to measure what's actually happening, which I absolutely love. But I would love to see more corporates and more workplaces actually committing to making longer term changes or committing to their humans in a way that is super meaningful for not just ticking a box, but actually wanting to see people enjoy that human experience and not just giving everyone a subscription to a meditation app and hoping they use it. And when you see the stats, hardly anyone uses it when they're just given a subscription out. It's an absolute waste of money. But what are you actually doing to show people that you care about them and that you want to see their well-being at the forefront of your organization. So I'd love to be part of those types of journeys, and just generally being able to impact more and more people, to be able to support them and create bespoke journeys for them to make meaningful shifts within that time.
And won't be surprised if people come back from that journey again to find out they want to change their job or their lives completely. So we'll see where that takes us. But I do hope that everyone who's listening, we've given them some food for thought, some ideas on how to approach empathy and meditation. And for anyone who's still in the corporate side, maybe there's an element that you can take away from our conversation today and bring to your workplace. So thank you so much, Katie. It was an absolute pleasure. One of my favorite ways to spend an afternoon. So thank you.
How wonderful. Honestly, I've enjoyed it so much, Hristina, and what a great conversation. Thank you for all your lovely insights as well.
As I sit here on this summer afternoon and reflect on our conversation with Katie, two things come to mind. First, just how much fun it was recording with her. We probably laughed for half of the episode, and I only kept some of the highlights. But this, to me, is exactly what ease and flow mean, and Katie is the perfect embodiment of that. The second thing was the free-falling. Do we give ourselves enough of a permission to do exactly that? Can we take a step forward despite not knowing all of the answers? And do we really need to know everything in advance? Is that even possible? The most beautiful part of a free flow to me has always been the space that it gives you to experiment, to have fun, to do something just for the enjoyment of it. And if that sounds like you, well, congratulations, you're on the right track. But if, on the other hand, you are stuck in your head going over and over the reasons, the pros, the cons, or looking for the right sign, the right time, the right place to start, well, I invite you to pause gently, breathe in and out, and simply start. Whatever it is you're planning or considering, just go for it. If anything, mine and Katie's stories are illustrations of exactly that. Nobody has it all figured out at the start. So if I can leave you with one lesson from today, it is to switch off your head and drop into the body. It is your best compass. So pay attention to how your work makes you feel afterwards. Yes, in the body. Let that be your compass, and trust that it's much more honest than any 5-year plan. And who knows, it might just show you everything you need to know. Thank you so much for listening to The Sound of Breaking Glass. If this episode moved something in you, I'd love to hear about it. So make sure that you stay tuned, because this fall we're going next level. A brand new video format for the podcast, a new Substack circle for daily musings and sharings within our community, and some fantastic new classes and collaborations all on the way, especially for you. So to find out more, make sure that you follow me on Instagram at lifewelllive.by.hv or connect on LinkedIn for the latest updates. I'll be sharing the details of the new Substack circle very, very shortly. Can't wait to share what's next with you. Until next time.